this is a good point to actually go back over some of the terminology that we're using and re-explain a few of the concepts, just to make sure that as much as possible this information can be understood by as many as possible. So first of all, let's start off with the term paradox. In your view, in this context, what is a paradox?
From the frame that we are in, timeline confusion and genocide and the other stuff, that it's when you have two present selves making choices in a free-willed universe, and one choice counters another choice and counters another choice. And then you have another layer to the definition of paradox. You have one present self that's on a very high energy earth and another present self that's on a very low energy earth. So one can be easily dominated over the other, and vice versa. The very low energy earth version of the present self can reclaim sovereignty from the high energy self, because paradox has to be resolved. And that resolution is figuring out in your lowest energy state how to recover all of your sovereignty.
So back in Lemuria and Atlantis, is the key in Lemuria or Atlantis? Who is the main player?
The key is Lemuria. Mm-hmm. In a quick explanation, Atlantis was another remedy, all right?
Okay.
But it was a different kind of remedy. It was a remedy that was created by the Lemurians and by the Pleiadians and a number of other species, because so many people had tried to recreate the first species of Earth. They needed to make a group of ancestors, and Atlantis was the anchor for the ancestor spirits who were trapped in the astral world during the timeline wars, and they were able to use a special type of spiritual technology to pull people out of the void between universes where they were stuck outside of time, and get them to incarnate into Earth, and that would be a way of getting them out of the void space.
And that's where Atlantis came from. That process.
That's where Atlantis came from. And
okay.
they literally within a period of 7 months, they had the whole planet was populated with buildings and everything, because they literally emerged out of the void and were able to use timeline reconstruction to put their society back together.
Okay, so the key to the paradox is there's a version of me in Lemuria making decisions about my life.
And a version of you in Atlantis, and a version of you on the Venusian homeworld, and versions of you everywhere, because you were erased many times, and there were other versions of you that brought other versions of yourself back and then sent them somewhere else as part of predictive models to unravel the hairball that had been created.
Now, it's the mechanism of the erasure that's part of the problem.
Correct.
Okay, do you want to describe the erasures you're referring to?
Okay, here's an example. You have a situation where you have one species that wants to create a brand new first species of Earth. So they
just a question on that. Why would they want to do that? Why do they want to recreate the first species of Earth?
Earth is the prize of the universe. It's a seventh dimensional galactic seed planet. It can multifunction in many different galaxies or universes at once. And it has special womb chakras on it that can rapidly advance any species that lives above those, as well as literally to create DNA wisdom that can be transferred to any other planet that is in a blank Akashic record world, or to literally populate a world with trees, plants, and animals on a very rapid scale. Earth is the galactic nursery.
Okay, so Earth is the treasure.
Earth is the treasure.
And what is it about being the first species of Earth? Does that give you a hold on Earth?
It gives you a hold on Earth and allows you to incarnate your people from another world there.
Okay, so you can create an entire version of Earth with your species on it.
Correct.
And
with the skin suit that comes built in with Earth.
Okay. Now, so there's a competition to become a first species of Earth.
Right, and that's because of the wars between the light and the dark.
Mm-hmm. And the time wars are actually an extension of that initial war between the light and the dark.
Correct.
So how are the time wars, ignoring the 15 beings that turned up here and participated later in the piece, how are the time wars carried out? What were the attacks taking place and the sorts of maneuvers they were doing?
Well, Lemuria isn't technically the first species even before the time wars. There was when Earth was created as an energy planet and then it solidified, it invited tens of billions of people, and in fact hundreds of billions of people from other universes and other solar systems and other galaxies to come there and occupy space to finish the transformation. And then afterwards, right after that, everybody was essentially asked to leave while Earth finished its gestation period so that it could birth its first species. And as it birthed its first species, you forward in time, the Lemurian who were existing began to experience a very strange wrinkle in the fabric of their time. They had timeline sense. So you have other species that identify Lemuria as the first species and began trying to erase them. When Earth asked everyone to leave, it's when the forces of light and darkness were at their peak of trying to steal Earth while it was still blank before it created its first skin suit. So
Okay.
that's the foundation. You know, this is the toughest part to understand. Who is the first species of Earth? And in reality, the first species of Earth is everyone that's mass invested. Everyone.
That is the entire 3,883 races?
Absolutely. Everyone.
And is this why the ultimate result that Prime Creator wants from this situation is a unified race?
Exactly. A DNA species race that all is a single.
Okay.
That's why disunity paradox was created and everyone was trapped. So that you had no choice but to eventually resolve it.
Okay, you could say that's a pretty kind of clever way to force thousands of races to unify, and here we are in the middle of it.
Yep.
So the timeline wars were actually executed over well, we've got a 52 million year period, or a 54 million year period to be more accurate, over which multiple races are playing with the time stream, trying to gain advantage and trying to actually become the influential race on this planet.
Correct. They want to be the prime species with the prime political agendas, so that when they go out into the galaxy, they're the ones recognized as the saviors. And that's the savior complex. And in one aspect, we are a savior, but we will be taught and we will be teachers. It'll be a co-creational experiment in sharing unity consciousness with other people and gaining trust over all the stuff that's happened here over the last 54 million years.
Wow. Okay, so we've got 3,883 races playing this time war, trying to gain advantage. Now, yesterday you gave me an example of how a time war incident would evolve, with multiple races actually all jumping in and attempting to influence the outcome at a particular point. Do you want to just replay that for the audience?
Sure. Let's say you have one race that is coming and trying to set themselves up as the new first race. So they come in, let's say, with an asteroid, and they put that, they multidimensionally transport an asteroid from one part of the galaxy to right above the atmosphere of Earth, so there's very little reaction time. At that exact moment in time, there's people that are preparing to prevent things like that, because when timeline wars, time is irrelevant. You can counter anything. They counter that asteroid. Another species at the same moment in time comes in and tries to use a nuclear weapon. That's countered. Another species sneaks in and tries to use a biological weapon. That's countered. And then 25 others come in and do something completely unexpected by mass investing breeding colonies, so that literally the population of the world increases by 25% in that wrinkle of timeline scenarios. And then you have another one that comes in and wipes out that whole timeline and teleports the Earth away.
And is it possible, the kind of incident you just described, is it possible to put a numerical count to the number of times that's been done over this period of time?
Earth's been moved 12 times. So every time it's been moved, it was to eliminate all of those people that were targeting specific moments in time to literally change the first species.
Okay,
but a numerical count, trillions.
Trillions. So they've literally been flinging this crap around almost continuously for this entire period.
Yep.
Okay.
From their presence, very little time has gone beyond.
They're just sitting there playing a game of simulations.
In one sense it is, but that level of technology isn't simulation isn't an accurate concept.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sentient simulation in many different angles and in many different ways. And what's occurring in these simulations is timeline viewing technology, where they literally view a timeline, or the sentience inside the computer can view 20,000 timelines at once, and then the operators figure out how to intermingle the timelines to get the best result at returning Lemuria or whoever else they are to the pristine timeline of their intention.
Leads me to two questions. One, who is in the instances where Earth was teleported, who made that decision? Is it done through the control system on the grid? Is it done through the collective consciousness? How is that actually done?
Normally it's done through the unity consciousness drive, with the unity consciousness on the surface graduating timeline. Every time Earth has been teleported, it has been done with technology that has heavily damaged the Earth, to the point where Earth needed to give a massive call out to all the galaxies in our universe and to the 17 universes beyond, otherwise she would have died. And that's why there's been this mass incarnation thing that's been trying to overpower the different timeline species, timeline genocide scenarios, so that you can literally just overwhelm the entire situation with a mass incarnation of life.
And it was during one of these teleports that an entire portion of Lemuria, or in Lemuria itself, from that time point, was actually lost.
Everything was lost. 108 billion people were suddenly in the void between two universes.
And that is what's being driving the Lemurians to, conquer this problem, return the timeline to the one that they desire.
Right.
And the message they got yesterday was that it's not going to work.
Nope. The message they got yesterday was the remedy, which they don't understand is a remedy. We are the remedy. So to them, this predictive modeling, the sentient timeline viewing technology hadn't shown them this wrinkle before. And if it did, there was a suppression of it somehow, some way.
They ignored it?
Well, there are different political organizations at work there, and some of them have reached the zealot levels, and some of them have not. The biggest thing of Lemuria and Atlantis is they did not teach their generation that followed the creation of powerful technology how to respect it, how to pass on the wisdom that timeline technology is very dangerous and should only be used in the strictest of circumstances, or the crystalline healing technologies that are turned into weapons in the different scenarios of the crystal war cities. The passing of the wisdom from one generation to another, all the while you have spiritual people living with scientific people, living with the hybrid of spiritual and science people, and then multiple different races from other worlds becoming refugees in Lemuria. So there was a watering down of the political concept and a poisoning from within, from entities that were forced incarnating themselves there to be a corruptive force.
There's been soft disclosure of this whole situation in many, many science fiction movies where timeline paradoxes are created, and
Yep.
the usual
Babylon 5, perfect example.
Yeah, the more recent one with Bruce Willis, for example, where he had to go back in time and shoot himself.
Yep.
Those paradoxes are generally very, very simple, relatively simple. I mean, Babylon 5 was more complicated, but we're talking about, say, the entire series of Babylon 5 being played out on a massive scale continuously for 52 million years.
Correct.
So, folks, if your head is spinning at this point, it's not you. Okay? This situation, it couldn't be any more complex at this. Probably, maybe it could, but let's not go there. Okay, so yesterday, our time, the Lemurians were informed that Atlas is not going to work, and that the remedy is something that is not on their agenda.
Correct.
And what was the
outcome? I told them, you are the past. You must allow yourself to be in the past, to be a non-I, mighty I am presence anymore, and that we, the low-energy human beings of this world that are the remedy, are going to begin reclaiming us from you. You know, the whole point of the galactic historian is no more secrets. And when there's no more secrets, people can begin to unravel their own paradox in their own way that is in their own sovereignty.
At a ground level, for us here, there's several key elements to that are, you know, if you like, on my checklist of how we actually disconnect ourselves from this disunity reality, or how we unify the disunity. And the first one is to take our energy out of the control system that exists, because overlaid on these time wars, in the latter part of the time wars, we have the arrival of the 15 multidimensional beings who jumped into the timeline along with all the other races competing to be first species of Earth, and actually took over. Took over the control system on the planet, only adding to the complication, as it were.
And they did it on purpose. They knew exactly what they were doing when they began incarnating themselves here. And they knew that the light and the dark were so into the zealotry of what they were doing that they could slip behind the lines, put themselves in a place of power, and put their own people, which are them, in the political organizations that can create a specific type of disunity, so that once the next time Earth was teleported, they could just seize control of the entire incarnation grid and mass incarnate themselves there. And that's when they became 40% of the breeding population. And they didn't have to take the karmic hit to timeline genocide. They allowed everyone else to do it.
Okay, so they literally snuck in the back door and stole the show.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a paradox remedy disunity reality. And the actual remedy itself is us disconnecting from the control system, and not only reclaiming our sovereignty from the control system, but reclaiming our sovereignty from these other I am presences that are still operating as if they were the present.
Correct.
And literally taking back the sovereignty of our souls.
Correct.
The independence of our souls, and breaking out of the paradox.
Correct. What you just described is 3 layers of paradox.
Yes.
And in fact, many of the other positive beings that have been trying to help unravel the scenario here were under the concept that we were dealing with 10 or 12 paradoxes, but in fact, the vast majority of people on this world are dealing with 40 or 50 plus paradoxes.
And by that, there's 40 or 50 I am presences in time.
Correct.
Operating as if they were the present and trying to shift timelines
Right.
to their own advantage.
And that's why we find so many people that are in past life connections, and so much of that past life connection is literally taking over here, because the person here isn't in a high-powered Earth. They're in a low-powered Earth.
So the remedy where we retake our sovereignty at ground level is pulling out of the control system and revoking all soul contracts, using
all different citizenships with other timeline scenarios.
Yes, in a spiritual court of equity.
Correct.
Or a court of spiritual equity. Okay, do you want to describe how the court of spiritual equity actually works?
It's a scenario where you and the mighty I am present self asks people that are your ancestors in your DNA lineage to hold space for you, so you can declare the mighty I am presence in no time. And in no time of declaration in the ancestors, you bring in the rest of the ancestors of Earth, not your physical, all ancestors of Earth. And these are the spirit people that interfunction with the creation and procreational process of Earth. They are the ones that work with the ever-present I am selves. And many of these exist on different dimensions and can coexist on multiple scenarios of times. And when you begin in a proper spiritual court of equity declaring the I am self, the presence and the revocation of contracts and the revocation of fine print, you find yourself in dominion with the earth, who's trying to find a remedy for each individual person. And the remedy is the individual sovereign power to begin reclaiming the various soul shards and fragments of yourself that are I am presence in multiple situations of different past timeline scenarios, or if they're locked out of the void of space. And I was described the 108 billion people that are locked out between the void of 2 universes with no time, or no galactic time too. They figured out a way to cross into the spiritual world and then get back to Earth and then to begin to reclaim their parts. And that was a way for that 108 billion to whittle down to about 95 billion. But ultimately, those people that did that created even more paradoxes.
Every way that the other versions of us move, they create more paradoxes.
Correct.
And they try to solve the problem.
Yeah, every time they do it, they make it worse.
And
because they never understood there already was a remedy in place.
Okay, and the remedy for us on the ground, quite literally, just taking back, withdrawing our consent to be part of the control system.
Correct.
And using the soul contract revocations to cancel all previous, literally, or cancel all previous soul contracts that are still in play and being used by other versions, other civilizations, using your consent from that situation to actually carry out further attacks, further manipulations of the timeline. So it stops all of the timeline war instantly.
Yep.
As soon as we reach unity, as soon as everybody, or as soon as sufficient in their collective consciousness have done that, the timeline will reset itself and will proceed.
Yep.
Okay,